Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're doing things a little differently, going over some English learning materials and what we can get out of them, even if we're already pretty fluent.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, we'll be looking specifically at a couple of example podcast scripts, one about daily routines and the other about self-introductions.
Interesting.
I think it'll be pretty cool to see what we can kind of uncover about culture and communication just from these basic examples. I mean, even though they're for beginners, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me how even the simplest language choices can reveal underlying values and assumptions.
Yeah.
It's like we're linguistic detectives, we're uncovering these hidden clues about how people see the world.
It's true. Okay, so let's dive right in with the talking about daily routine script. One host, Mark, starts his day with coffee and toast,
Oh, yeah.
and the other host, Sarah, prefers tea and eggs. What struck me is that these seem like very deliberate choices, even for a basic English lesson. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right to pick up on that. Food choices and language learning materials often reflect common cultural associations or stereotypes.
Oh.
So like coffee and toast, they might suggest a busy Western lifestyle.
Right.
While tea and eggs, could represent a more traditional or relaxed approach.
Interesting.
It's fascinating how these subtle cues can shape our understanding of different cultures,
Yeah.
even without us really realizing it.
So it's not just about teaching vocabulary. It's also about subtly introducing cultural context at the same time.
That's exactly right. And you see it again with their transportation methods.
Yeah.
Mark drives to work while Sarah walks.
Oh.
Do you think this is just a practical consideration, or could it be subtly teaching something about different lifestyles through vocabulary?
I'm leaning towards the latter.
Okay.
I mean, it makes you wonder if these seemingly simple scenarios are actually laying the groundwork for a deeper understanding of cultural nuances.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, these basic scripts are not just about grammar and vocabulary. They're a gateway to exploring different ways of life.
Okay, so now let's shift gears to the second script, introducing yourselves.pdf.
Okay.
This one focuses on fundamental phrases like, my name is, I am ... years old, I am from Bia, and they seem so straightforward.
Right.
But I imagine there's more to them than meets the eye.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, these phrases are the building blocks of human interaction found across every culture, but the information we choose to share and how we share it can vary dramatically. I mean, some cultures prioritize formality and titles, while others value informality and personal connections.
Right, so even something as simple as a self-introduction can reveal a lot about a culture's communication style.
Precisely. And notice how the script emphasizes repetition and practice.
Yeah.
They encourage you to repeat phrases like, my name is, multiple times. And there's a reason for this.
Good.
It's not just rote memorization.
Yeah.
Think about how children acquire language. They hear phrases repeated constantly, and this repetition helps build those neural pathways, making the language feel more natural over time.
So it's like embedding those phrases in your brain through sheer repetition.
Exactly. Each repetition strengthens those connections, making it easier for you to access and use those phrases spontaneously.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we've seen how these simple scripts can reveal so much about the intricacies of language learning. We've talked about how they subtly introduce cultural context and emphasize the importance of repetition for fluency. Do you see any connection between the highly structured self-introductions and the relatively simple daily routines being described?
That's a great observation. I do think there's a connection. Both of these scripts are essentially providing you with a framework, a safe space to start communicating in English. The language is simple, the routines are familiar,
Right.
and the emphasis on repetition helps build confidence.
Makes sense.
It's like learning to walk before you can run a marathon.
So it's about giving learners the basic tools and then encouraging them to go out and build something with them.
That's exactly right. As learners gain confidence and fluency, they can start expanding on these frameworks, adding more detail, nuance, and personality to their communication.
That's a great analogy. It highlights the idea that language learning is an ongoing process.
Yeah, it is. And this process mirrors how we all learn our native languages.
Right.
We start with simple words and phrases, mimicking those around us, and gradually build our vocabulary and understanding over time.
This has been incredibly insightful. It seems like these beginner scripts are not just about learning English, but also about understanding the fundamentals of language and communication itself.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah, it's fascinating how much depth we're finding in these seemingly simple scripts. We've talked about how they introduce cultural nuances and emphasize repetition for fluency, but how can learners go beyond these basic frameworks and start expressing themselves more fully in English?
Well, that's where the real fun begins. You know, once you've mastered the basic structure, you can start adding details, personalizing your responses, and incorporating new vocabulary. Instead of just saying, my name is Mark, you could say, my name is Mark, and I'm a graphic designer from Seattle.
Yeah.
It's like adding layers of color to a sketch,
Yeah.
gradually transforming it into this vibrant, detailed masterpiece.
I love that analogy. It really captures the idea of language learning as this evolving process.
Exactly. And as you progress, you can start incorporating more complex grammar structures, idioms, and cultural references.
Uh-huh.
For example, instead of simply saying, I eat breakfast, you could say, I usually grab a quick bite on my way to work. A bagel and a coffee do the trick. This not only expands your vocabulary, but it also gives a glimpse into your daily routine and lifestyle.
So these details help you move beyond just conveying information and start expressing your personality and experiences.
Precisely. Language becomes a tool for connection and self-expression. And as you become more comfortable, you can start exploring different communication styles. For example, you might learn how to use humor, tell stories, or engage in more nuanced conversations.
It sounds like there's a whole world of possibilities waiting to be unlocked once you have that solid foundation.
Absolutely. And remember, the key is to keep practicing and engaging with the language in meaningful ways.
Right.
Don't be afraid to make mistakes. They're part of the learning process.
So far, we've focused on daily routines and self-introductions. What are some other common topics that English learners might encounter? And how can these basic scripts help them navigate those situations?
Well, think about everyday scenarios. Going to the store, asking for directions, ordering food at a restaurant. These all present opportunities to use and build upon those foundational skills.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine you're at a coffee shop. You can adapt the phrases from the self-introduction script to say, hello, my name is... I'd like to order a latte, please.
So you're taking those building blocks and adapting them to different contexts.
Exactly. And as you encounter new situations, you'll naturally expand your vocabulary and understanding of grammar. You might learn how to ask for recommendations, express preferences, or handle unexpected situations.
It sounds like real-world practice is crucial for solidifying those language skills.
It is. And there are countless resources available to help you practice, from textbooks and apps to online courses and language exchange partners. But the key is to find ways to make language learning enjoyable and relevant to your life.
Engaging with the language in a way that feels authentic and meaningful.
Exactly. It's not just about achieving fluency, it's about discovering new ways to connect with the world around you.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from the subtle cultural cues hidden in basic scripts to the importance of real-world practice for fluency. But before we wrap up, I want to touch upon something that's been on my mind throughout this discussion. We've talked about how these scripts are designed for beginner English learners.
Right.
But it seems like they offer valuable insights for anyone interested in language and communication, regardless of their skill level.
You've hit the nail on the head. These simple scripts remind us that language is about so much more than just grammar rules and vocabulary lists. It's a fundamental part of the human experience, shaping how we think, interact, and make sense of the world.
So even if you're not learning English as a second language, there's still a lot to be gained from examining these basic building blocks of communication.
Absolutely. They offer a fresh perspective on how we use language to express ourselves, connect with others, and navigate different cultural contexts.
It's been a fascinating exploration, and I think it's safe to say that these beginner English scripts have given us much more to think about than we initially anticipated. We've uncovered some pretty interesting stuff today, going from the cultural cues that are hidden in these basic phrases to how we can use the simplest building blocks to express ourselves more fully in English. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about.
I like it already.
We've spent all this time talking about how beginner English learners are introduced to the language.
Yeah.
But it seems like these same concepts apply to all of us, even in our native languages.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about your own daily routines. How do they reflect your values and priorities? What do your own self-introductions reveal about your personality and how you want to be perceived by others?
It's easy to take that stuff for granted, I think, especially in our native language. I mean, we don't often stop and think about the subtle ways our language choices kind of shape our interactions and how we present ourselves to the world.
Do you ever catch yourself highlighting certain aspects of your day or your background, depending on who you're talking to?
All the time. It's so interesting how we tailor our language to fit the context and the audience. You know, we might emphasize different aspects of our personality or our experiences depending on if we're talking to a close friend or a colleague or total stranger.
So even just saying good morning can carry all these different meanings and intentions depending on the situation.
Exactly. And it's not even just about the words, it's our tone of voice, our body language, our cultural background. All of these elements contribute to the richness and the complexity of human communication.
It's like we're constantly doing this intricate linguistic dance,
Uh-huh.
adapting our steps to fit the music and our partner.
I love that. And the more we understand those nuances, the more effectively we can communicate and connect with other people.
It seems like the journey of language learning never truly ends.
Yeah.
Even in our native tongues, there's always something more to discover, more layers to uncover, and more ways to refine our self-expression.
You got it. Language is this living, breathing entity,
Hmm.
constantly evolving and adapting to the world around us. And as we learn and grow, so too does our ability to wield its power.
Well said. I think this deep dive has given us all a lot to think about, not just about learning English, but about the very nature of language and how it shapes our lives.
Couldn't agree more. It's been awesome exploring these ideas with you.
Thanks for coming on the show, and thanks to everyone listening for joining us on this deep dive into the world of language and communication. Until next time, keep those minds curious and keep exploring the depths of human expression.